Frank Watson here with Tom Probasco and John Lowe. Old guys struggling with technology and religion and just about everything else. Tom, you're young enough. I kind of include you in the old guys. Just you are retired, so
Yeah, I some of my younger friends certainly would put me in that category, so no problem.
What is your age, if I may ask? What is your age, if I may ask?
69. 4 years out, I'll be 70.
Well, that's real young.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
my,
Time just keeps on marching on.
you look much younger than that.
Oh, well, thank you. Especially, I've got something wrong with this video card. I look like it's almost kind of a sepia tone thing here. So maybe, I always thought that gave me that older. So there's something, I don't know whether I need an updated video card or what it is. But the old saying, it is what it is. So, but you can see, the color on you guys comes through nice and clear. Maybe you got a newer computer. I don't know what this one's about. I don't know, 2017, whatever. But the color on it's not great for this type of thing.
Frank, you're sitting on the moon, aren't you?
Yeah, Frank's he's in the yeah. Frank, there you can see the earth behind him there. He's out there. Frank's always out there.
That's the Earth seen from the moon. It looks like, I don't know, outer space.
Yeah, it's hard to tell where he's sitting on. Asteroid, I don't know. Pretty steady though.
On what plane are you, Frank?
Well, I think of that as a halo.
Well,
oh,
you have had that
I'm
going.
I'm putting my best foot forward.
Oh yeah.
So,
Yeah.
anything you want to start with? Or we go back to, or
Got any poems to read, Tom?
Well, I wasn't prepared with a poem today. I have I read the one? It's I've read it to you before, Frank. Let me see if I can find this real quick. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. I remember those. Yeah, it's called The Waking, by Theodore. It might be Roethke, Roethke. I'm a past master of mispronounced words and names. But it goes like this. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. I feel my fate in what I cannot fear. I learn by going where I have to go. We think by feeling. What is there to know? I hear my being dance from ear to ear. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. Of those that so close beside me, which are you? God bless the ground. I shall walk softly there and learn by going where I have to go. Light takes the tree, but who can tell us how? The lowly worm climbs up a winding stair. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. Great nature has another thing to do to you and me. So take the lively air and lovely learn by going where to go. This shaking keeps me steady. I should know. What falls away is always and is near. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. I learn by going where I have to go.
I wake to sleep.
And take my waking slow, and learn by going where I have to go.
So what he is saying is that he slowly enters a waking sleep.
Yeah, it in some ways you could see it as contradictory, but it's a poem.
Well, yeah, poetry is supposed to challenge us, and I think uh,
It so many poems that I read, there are a few that I read and I don't understand them, I don't like them. There are others I read that I like, but I can't explain them, and I'm not necessarily sure they need explained. Um, there's one called Mind by Richard Wilbur. The mind is like a bat. Let me see if I can remember. The mind is like a bat. See, I used to have it memorized, uh, but it's one of those. I don't know what the thing means. Mind by Richard Wilbur. See if I can get this without. Oh, yeah, now I remember. Mind in its purest play is like some bat that beats about in caverns all alone, contriving by a kind of senseless wit not to conclude against a wall of stone. It has no need to falter or explore. Darkly it knows what obstacles are there, and so may weave and flitter, dip and soar in perfect courses through the blackest air. And has this simile a like perfection? The mind is like a bat, precisely, save that in the very happiest intellection, a graceful error may correct the cave.
hmm.
So this is one that has some pondering of what it means. Is that Richard Wilbur describes the mind as a lonely, dark entity with hope for change. Throughout the whole poem, he compares the human mind to a bat. This furthers his argument that the mind works alone with boundaries, but has the possibility of escaping. And it goes on from there. But I think that's the thing um, about some poems that, and I think a lot of folks, Julia, my wife, she doesn't like it because she says I interpret it. She's been in classes where she interprets it a certain way, and then they say, no, that's wrong. And she just was like, okay, I'm done with it. And I think that's a mistake.
Done with what?
She just doesn't care for it because she's faced criticism. She has faced criticism for her interpretations of poetry in particular.
So is she not for poetry or not for criticism?
I think it's due, a lot of us sit through classes.
Yeah.
And depending on the instructor, we come away, a good teacher may say, that's fine. You interpret it the way you interpret it. Other times somebody might tell you, and apparently that happened with Julia, no, that's wrong. And so I think a lot of people, if a poem is not immediately discernible as to what's meant, like if you take a classic like Robert Frost's Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening.
Uh-huh.
Beautiful poem, fairly, easy to interpret. It's kind of, I think that's the beauty of it. It's complex and simple at the same time. But then he's got The Road Not Taken, which seems straightforward until somebody points out a few things in the early stanzas that make it less so. So some find that off, put it, off-putting, and others find it okay. Let's talk about it. So I think that's, just the nature of the format of the,
Well, Tom, if you had a favorite piece of poetry, what would it be?
that is very, if forced to pick one, and I wouldn't like that, but let's say I had to pick one, it would be Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. I think part of that has to do with how early I encountered it. It's often anthologized. Um, uh, and again, Frost, in general, he's got plenty of poems. I have no idea what they mean, but he has one he wrote late in life. Um, Now I out walking the world desert. I leave now I out walking the world desert. Um, and my shoe and my stocking do me no hurt. I leave behind good friends in town. Let them get well wined and go lie down. Don't think I leave for the hour of dark, like Adam and Eve put out of the park. There is no one I am put out with or put out by. Unless I'm wrong, I, I unless I'm wrong, I but something, uh, I but obey the urge of a song. I'm bound away, and I may return if dissatisfied with what I learned from having died. Now that's when he wrote late in life, and it's lighthearted, for Frost, and
Uh-huh.
well, yes, the Frost ones, but that's one I've always enjoyed. Um, I have it imperfectly memorized, obviously, but I've always liked that. But uh, but yeah, Stopping by Woods is such a classic, um, that I suppose. How about you, Frank? I mean, I know you do read some, and it's not necessary, but I mean, you're a poet in and of yourself. You got your songs and singer songwriter in your own right.
I can think of a fragment of poetry by Rudyard Kipling.
Oh yeah.
Um, there are 9 and 20 ways of reading tribal lays, and every single one of them is right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I'm sure there's more to that poem, but
yeah.
uh, my
That
old friend
sticks in your
Paul,
mind.
huh?
That sticks in your mind.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I tend to believe that. I I tend to I I think that there is um, there's so much to the idea that we are all at the center of the universe, and all of us are just part one node on a vast connected network.
Mhm.
Uh, and that challenges me when I think of the finding unity, finding oneness. Uh, but there is a oneness. There is a source. Things had to start somewhere and they have to end somewhere. I think so. I get lost in all that.
Oh, I mean, yeah, and if you thought you understood it, it's like, yeah, don't think so. Well, and I missed last time because I thought you were said not Mondays, but so I wasn't with you. But the time before that, we ended up, and then KaPOOF happened. Poof happened. And and this, John, reminds me, I was about to ask you, well, I'm Frank, the Lord's Prayer, deliver us from evil.
Oh yeah, that was one of the things that you were talking about when we.
Yeah, deliver us.
Yeah.
So I'm listening to the Lord's Prayer. I recite it, and then you get to the end and deliver us evil.
From evil.
From evil.
Yeah.
And what is, people will talk about the existence of God, but you don't real often hear, well, I suppose in the more fundamentalist congregations or denominations, it's Beelzebub, it's the devil, and it's real as God. And so I suppose that's one view, but it's not the only one. And again, growing up in the particular Quaker church that I grew up in, there was not a lot of, even wasn't no altar call, come to Jesus, about talk of a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. There wasn't really that, but there was a moral code. Well, I've talked about that some. And very little talk about the devil, Satan. So I'm often curious as to what is the perception. Okay, so you, John, describe yourself as a evangelical Catholic.
Yeah.
How would they, to the extent that that's even done, how would they interpret evil? If that's even a fair question.
A very good question. And this whole thing about, we're talking about poetry and so forth and so on. I'm pretty much just a little come back to that word, that subject slightly here.
Yeah.
I'm much of a child when it comes to poetry. I will say that I'm right brain, if you know what I mean by that.
Yeah.
That is, I tend to be artistic, musical. When it comes to music, I didn't listen much to the lyrics.
Yeah.
The music, yes. And stories, yes. Myths, yes. Not literally, but what's behind, the grits of what's behind a myth. Say what's expressed there that a little bit like poetry too. What's there that can be brought out in no other way than say in the myth.
Yeah, and as you said before, it's all about the word about. You said that.
Yeah, well, that's the intellect part. The intellect is about this, about that, and so forth. Data.
Yeah, it is
information. In science, information's the big thing. That's one of the big words of science today. Information. Well, what's that mean? Well, it means data. Well, what's real, for the scientist.
Yeah.
And incidentally, in passing too, you maybe didn't watch 60 Minutes, and I did mention this to Frank, but now they're going to come up with a computer that's so completely, well, it's not even considered a computer anymore. Whatever we have as a computer is called the quantum system.
I saw that.
Well, you did. So. Yeah. And what threw me, it could be done in 5 years by the end of this decade.
Yeah.
And on your laptop.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Where's the bat here on this? Flying, and of course it reminded me of Plato, the cave, and the light and the shadows.
Yeah.
So anyway, but back to the evil. And of course, this is shrouded in myth, but is there a question philosophically or ontologically of a reality that is beyond this world, a supernatural reality of evil, not like Plato. Now, Plato would say that there is a reality, a God that is evil. God is evil. There is a God that's evil. He's a dualist. And then there's the God of truth. And so we would, as Christians, would not be dualists, but we do hold to Plato. However, and then he uses a lot of myths in his explaining these things. But he would say that as far as the physical world is evil to Plato, and it's always movable. There's nothing permanent about it. As you brought up about entropy, where are things going to go? Who knows where? And it's always movable, nothing reliable. But what is reliable? What is eternal? Well, those things of the mind, truth, goodness, beauty. These things are eternal, universals. Warning against particulars, which are always changing and moving. So we experience the particulars, but we also have it in our minds. So we're sort of amphibious, if I put it that way. We're physical and spiritual too, and we must always go the route toward the spiritual. So that's Plato, and even we must be governed by the intellect, the good, the philosopher, rather than the mobs down there. That what can they do? Can they even organize themselves? Or we're facing those things today. Why are the mobs following, who knows what? Blindly, pretty much going back just to what? Well, just survival, the economy. The economy is a big thing. What about ideals? What about democracy? So forth and so on. So Plato applies today. But anyway, evil. But there is a force. Now, Jordan Peterson, a profound thinker and psychologist of the Union School, believes that there is an evil principle, and that he's a scientist, an evil principle that's beyond the world, beyond what we realize in this world. So it's metaphysical, it's beyond the physical world, spiritual. And it is, and there are a number of evangelicals today now. They're changing their ways, but not just the followers of Trump. There's a whole new school of evangelicals coming along and coming up with what they call process theology and openness, that God does not know everything backward and forward, that there are areas where God does not know. He gives us freedom, complete freedom. And therefore, and then why are there earthquakes? Why are there mosquitoes? Why are there these diseases? Why does this child down in Africa have worms in its eyes, and so forth and so on? Metaphysically, spiritually, well, it goes back to some evil involvement in creation.
Involvement in what?
In creation. In creation. Now, these are philosophical, theological questions that have been, in other words, we're trying to get at the problem of evil, which has always been a mystery. Going back to Job, who are you to ask God what this and why all these things happening to you, Job? Who are you to ask? So with the problem of evil, it's beyond you. Well, maybe at that stage of Job, but now there are these philosophers thinking, well, there is a spiritual principle, not some myth that surrounds it, but a spiritual principle that you could call the satanic.
Yeah, because
this could explain why there is natural evils. We can explain moral evils because that goes back to the human will, free will. But what about the physical evils, the suffering of animals, and all this sort of thing? And so there's the good and evil even within creation itself. Now, these are what some fundamentalists are thinking about these days.
Because people, you get these surveys, do you believe in God? But I've never heard of one where they ask people, do you believe in the devil? So it's like it's not
Well,
even on the, it's not like they're.
why do a lot of people don't believe in God? Because they have a certain idea about what God is. A man in the sky, the long beard, and he's ready to pounce on you with a club, if you don't do what he says by these commandments, all these rules, boom, 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 the tyrant. This is Christopher Hitchens' great criticism of religion, period. Here's this tyrant up there, dictator, boom, and here are these rules, all we set up, and you better follow these, or I'll punish you forever. That's why a lot of people don't believe in God, right? That's it.
Who wants to believe in that?
No sophistication at all. Just then they get a little bit of sophistication. They throw up they believe every word of the Bible. It's just boom, 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 completely, absolutely the word of God, boom, boom. And then when they come up with the contradictions, then they lose everything. Lose their faith, everything. Can't believe in God.
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember that in the scripture, Jesus addressed himself to the devil, to Satan.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of things in the Bible. You're going back to the Old Testament too. There, implications. Well, what about the snake in the garden? There's all kinds of scripture to follow the Satan, but we've come pretty much summarized it in sort of this myth, of the horns and the fire and the forks and the tail, sort of a dragon type of myth. Who would believe in that?
But sometimes as the tempter, he's seen as a very suave, no horns or tails, but seen as the tempter.
Indeed, yes. And God allows it. Now, God's still all powerful, but then there's the question where he allows freedom. Freedom is the big thing. If there was no freedom, everything would be all just so straight and, perfect and orderly and everything. So it's freedom that comes in there. And otherwise, we would be robots. Robots. Maybe this is part of God's creative nature. When I did my artwork, I remember the teacher always said, look for the accidents. Look for the accidents in your artwork. When you first start with doing artwork, you want to do everything just right, very tight and precise, and just as you see it, realism. And she says, loosen up, let it fly, let it flow. And so this reflects life in a lot of ways. You can see poetry in that, could you? And that's why I have tempted toward the philosopher North Whitehead, Alfred North Whitehead. I have trouble getting that out. Who believes in what process philosophy and theology? And he says, well, there's so many things I could say here, but that there is novelty in creation too, novelty, and there are accidents that appear, and then he takes the accidents and brings good out of it. It's always a process of accidents, change, good out of it. Freedom, yeah, freedom, and actually in them you got your laws of nature, but also there are accidents of freedoms there too. And so in that, why good can come out of it. So is history. So is history. All these things that are happening, what novelties, change. See, some of us are afraid of change. Oh my, we're scared to death of change. I'm 95 years of age. I'm not afraid of change.
Yeah. And has that changed over your life?
No, I don't think so too much.
Okay.
Except I went through a fundamentalist point of view too at the time, looking for the apocalypse. You know, if God's going to come in by power somehow and change everything and get it right, or will he work through love and work it out somehow, no matter what? That's where I've come to in the later years.
Okay.
Love wins out. Again, what would you say? Something I'm certain of on a value level. There's certain things we can be certain of. Mathematics, and as far as the physical universe, well, there are things that happen and science makes progress because they can test and test and retest and base certain things like pretty much on fact. But they're always open too, and that's one of the good thing about science. They're always open to their criticism of their points of view.
Yeah.
But as far as moral values, and then some of your poetry reminds me of a philosophy that's very prevalent today. And I'm trying to get a hold on it myself. It's called deconstruction. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
The philosophy of Derrida, or I guess it is French, and there's another one, can't think of his name, in France, and a whole host of others. And it's tied in also with Jean-Paul Sartre's existentialism, which stresses stresses freedom, and that you can only for Sartre is that if there is a God, then he can't be free. Sartre can't be free if there is a God. So, in other words, he has to be an atheist to be free and to do his thing. And freedom is what he wills, his freedom. Everything's freedom. Well, that affects our society today. Freedom's everything. What about morality? What about love? Even freedom itself, they reject any essence. They reject essence in favor of existence. Existence precedes essence, in other words. So there's no truth out there. And some of your poetry sounds that way. There's no truth out there. You're just wandering around and make it what you will, and you see this way and go that way. And it's postmodernism, and I think you need to look for that in your poetry because it sounds like a lot of it. It's just a sort of nihilism. We don't know what's this, that, and the other. Where are we going? Well, it doesn't matter, or sort of nihilism.
That's beyond me when I read a poem. I don't think
well, you don't
about
like it. You don't like it. You know why you don't like it. You know why.
Yeah.
Ask yourself that. Why don't I like that?
Well, in my what I would not like is if there are a few poems that I read that I don't understand, but they have a beautiful sound to them.
Yeah.
But then there are others that I read that are just so obscure to me that but it doesn't really have anything to do with whether they're postmodernists or anything like that. That's beyond my education, probably my brain level.
A lot of times the philosophy behind it, and they were right in philosophy. Sartre wrote lots of poetry, and he wrote a lot of. He's dead now, and a lot of stories. There's another one that he's died too, and I'm trying to. The Pest was the name of the book. You probably remember that. Can't think of his name. But
oh shoot,
he's a French existentialist, but it's Derrida. That's Derrida is the philosopher of postmodernism, and you end up in nihilism, that there's no truth, and if there is truth, then we can explain it away by language. you can't really say anything because language means something to one thing, something to someone else. And this will anything you can say, there's always, well, it can be somebody else will have another interpretation of that word. Well, somebody else of that word, and they can just explain everything away to nothingness.
Yeah.
You can't talk. And there are philosophers that will counter that. See, we got people that oppose that, and philosophers on language, and will say, "Oh no." So when you get into poetry, there's all these philosophies on language, and what's behind it, and you got kneeling, all kinds of weird things going on out there. I'm trying to get a hold of this Derrida again, and there's the other one from France who's the big name now. I can't think of his name. And then there was American too, Laura, something like that.
Are they current people, or is this from times gone by?
Well, very current. I think Derrida is still living. He was taught now at Princeton, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Or Yale, one of the two. And they can be very convincing because you take words and thinking, take the opposites of thinking. They call it deconstruction. And there's a thinker out now going, his name is Constantine. And he's now deconstructing atheism. It's the opposite. Deconstructing atheism. He's now a believer. He's from Russia. So, there's so many exciting things going on right now. If you just listen to YouTube and the different thinkers they're really dealing with these very things that we're talking about, and it affects music, music too,
Well, and there's a different
rock and all this sort of thing. And one of the worst, the Grammy Awards a year ago was the worst I ever saw. It was just nauseating.
What's that, John? What was nauseating?
The Grammy Awards a year ago, not this last year, but the year ago. It was talking about Madonna was advocating devil worship. She did. She advocated it. She's a rebel now. Yeah.
Who did?
Madonna. No, I didn't. I wasn't even aware of that.
Oh yeah, a year ago.
You never know while
she's
some of these
everywhere.
celebrities say what they say sometimes. You just kind of don't know what they're doing.
Well, yeah. Well, she's gone through everything. She first was Catholic, and then she was something else, and then she was Jewish. The Kabbalah, she was strong in that. And
now devil worship.